fire lookout towers of America's wilderness are more than steel and wood. They are thresholds, perched where the earth's pulse meets the sky's indifference. In their solitude, they cradle the human soul, offering refuge from a fractured world. Yet they also amplify the whispers of something older, something woven into the roots of the pines. This is the story of 5 men: Cal Monroe, Evan Parker, Dylan Hargrave, Joe Martin, and Lester Forney, whose summers as fire lookouts in Montana, Idaho, Oregon, and Northern California became descents into dread. From 1983 to 1994, their accounts, pieced from logs, interviews, and haunted confessions, form a chronicle of the unseen. Figures that linger in the shadows, tracks that defy nature, and a presence that knows their names. These are not tales of blood or violence, but of a deeper terror, the kind that burrows into the mind and lingers in the silence. Welcome to Whispers from the Watchtower, where the forest watches, and its hunger is patient as stone. Cal Monroe was 38 when he climbed the 80-foot wooden tower in Montana's Flathead National Forest in June 1983. A Missoula native, he was a man unmoored, his life shattered by a divorce that left him hollow. "Margie took everything," he told a friend, his voice raw. "Not just the house. My sense of who I was." The tower, a creaking relic from the 1930s, was his sanctuary, 20 miles from the nearest town, reachable only by a dirt road that twisted through pines like veins. Its weathered planks groaned underfoot, the windows rattling in the wind, offering views of a forest that stretched endless. A sea of green under a sky that bled purple at dusk. Cal's days were a rhythm of solitude, scanning the horizon for smoke, logging weather reports, reading Steinbeck by lantern light. The tower's interior was a time capsule. Sagging cot, blackened stove, a radio that hissed like a distant storm. The silence was heavy, he wrote in his log, found years later. Not empty, but full, like the forest was holding its breath. At night, the pines swayed, their shadows pooling like ink across the clearing below, and the tower's creaks became a chorus, as if it spoke to the wilderness. In his 3rd week, the quiet turned menacing. It began with sounds, metal clinking, like coins in a tin cup, followed by branches snapping, too deliberate for wind or wildlife. "I thought it was my mind," Cal said in a 1985 interview, his eyes distant. "Isolation does that, makes you hear things." He ignored it, focusing on the routine. Checking the radio, sketching the ridgelines in a notebook, his pencil tracing the forest's jagged silhouette. But on July 18th, during an evening walk, the world shifted. The air was cool, the sky a bruise of violet, the pines casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward him. 50 yards out, he saw a figure, tall, impossibly still, its silhouette blurred at the edges, as if it absorbed the light. "It wasn't human," he wrote, his handwriting unsteady. "No face, just a shape, but I felt its eyes, boring through me." Cal froze, his breath shallow, then walked on, feigning calm, his boots crunching louder than he intended. The figure didn't move, vanishing when he glanced back from the tower's steps. He radioed the ranger station, but no one had been reported in his sector. "Just you out there, Cal?" The voice crackled, oblivious to his dread. The clinking returned nightly, closer, more insistent, joined by footsteps circling the tower's base. Cal's sleep frayed, his dreams filled with a faceless shape standing in the pines, its head tilted at an impossible angle. On July 25th, he found a rusted hunting knife embedded in a tree near a creek, its blade crusted with dried blood, the handle worn smooth. "No tracks, no campers," he wrote. "Whose blood? Why here?" The creek's water ran clear, but the air carried a faint metallic tang, like old pennies. He left the knife, fearing its touch, and hurried back, locking the tower's hatch. By August, the figure grew bolder. On the 1st, Cal woke at midnight to the clinking, now a hammering metal striking the tower's base. His flashlight caught a shape below, hunched, elongated, its limbs too long, its head tilted as if listening. "It moved toward the stairs," he said, his voice breaking years later. He grabbed his rifle, hands trembling, the bolt clicking as he chambered around. The figure paused, then dissolved into the shadows, leaving the clearing silent. Cal sat up all night, the rifle across his lap, the lantern's flicker casting ghosts on the walls. On August 2nd, a storm roared in, lightning splitting the sky, rain lashing the tower. The hammering returned, louder, relentless, shaking the wooden frame. Cal threw open the balcony door, rifle raised, and shouted into the gale, "Who are you?" Lightning flashed, revealing the figure at the tower's base. Staring up, its form clearer now, gaunt, pale, clutching something metallic. Cal fired a warning shot, the crack swallowed by thunder. The figure didn't flinch. He fired again, aiming true, and it crumpled motionless in the mud. At dawn, Cal descended, rifle in hand, the storm's aftermath a dripping hush. The figure was an old man, his skin like parchment, clothes tattered, eyes clouded white. In his hands was a rusted chain, its links etched with symbols, spirals and jagged lines no one could decipher. Rangers called him a drifter, mad from years in the wilds, but Cal saw the chain's weight, heavier than it should have been, its metal cold to the touch. "It wasn't just a man," he whispered. "It was waiting for me all that time." Cal left the tower a week later, reassigned to a desk job. The knife, tested for DNA, held human blood, unmatched to any database. The chain, stored in a Missoula evidence locker, remains unstudied, its symbols a silent enigma. Cal never returned to the Flathead, his nights haunted by the clinking, a sound he hears in every gust of wind. Evan Parker was 34 in June 1987, a man adrift after a divorce that stripped him of purpose. "I wasn't running from her," he wrote in a 1989 letter, "but from the man I'd become." A loner by nature, he took a fire lookout post in northern Idaho's Bitterroot National Forest, craving the silence of its spruce and pine valley. The tower, a weathered box on steel stilts, sat 50 miles from the nearest town, its windows offering a panorama of green, the radio a lifeline that often failed. The forest swallowed sound, Evan said. It was like stepping into a void. His days were solitary, scanning for smoke, cleaning the tower's dusty corners, brewing coffee that tasted of tin. The interior was cramped. Cot, desk, a shelf of moldy paperbacks, the walls stained with years of cigarette smoke. At night, the wind sang through the pines, and the tower's creaks became a lullaby. Though Evan rarely slept deeply, his dreams tangled with memories of his ex-wife's voice. "I thought I could outrun regret," he wrote, "but it followed me up here." By mid-June, the valley grew uneasy. Radio reports spoke of missing hikers. First one, a man in his 20s, then a woman, then a third, all vanished without trace. The forest felt wrong. Evan logged on June 15th. "No birds, no wind, just a weight, like eyes on my back." On June 20th, at dusk, a scream pierced the silence. Sharp, human, cut off mid-breath. Evan bolted to the window, flashlight sweeping the dark, but the pines revealed nothing. "It wasn't a cougar," he said later, his voice hollow. "Cougars don't scream like that." The next days were tense, the silence heavier, the valley's stillness unnatural. Evan stopped smoking outside, the act feeling too exposed, and kept his rifle close, its weight a cold comfort. On the 11th night, a banging woke him, heavy, rhythmic, shaking the tower's door. "Who's there?" he shouted, flashlight trembling in his grip. No answer, just silence, then more pounding, deliberate, taunting. He yanked the door open, the cold air rushing in, but the steps were empty, the forest a wall of black. He locked the hatch, heart hammering, and sat in the dark, the rifle across his knees. The banging returned on the 15th night, joined by a voice, low, raspy, calling Parker from the tree line. Evan's flashlight caught yellow eyes, glowing, fixed on him, too high for any animal. "It knew my name," he said, his hands still shaking years later. He fired, the shot echoing, and the eyes vanished, leaving no trace. No blood, no tracks. The next morning, the clearing was pristine, but the air felt charged, as if the forest held its breath. Evan radioed for relief, claiming illness, and left the next day. Rangers found no signs of the figure, but noted an eerie absence of wildlife, the valley silent for days. Evan's bullet, lodged in a pine, bore no blood or tissue, defying explanation. He settled in Boise, avoiding forests, his nights plagued by the sound of knocks, each one a summons he fears to answer. Dylan Hargrave was 40 in June 1994, a man seeking solace in Montana's Bitterroot National Forest after a divorce that left him raw. The world's noise was too much, he told a ranger, his voice weary. Up here, I could think. His tower, a creaking relic on a ridge, overlooked a valley of pine and spruce, its isolation a balm for his wounds. The tower's walls were plastered with maps, the radio crackling with static, the air thick with the scent of damp wood and coffee. Dylan's routine was meditative, scanning for smoke, logging wind speeds, sketching the valley's contours in a journal. The forest was alive, he wrote, not just trees, but something deeper watching. At night, the pines whispered, their shadows dancing across the tower's windows, and Dylan felt a strange peace, as if the wilderness understood his pain. But on June 10th, that peace shattered. He saw a shadow moving in the valley, too fast, too upright for a bear or elk. It had purpose, he logged, his pen digging into the paper. The radio was silent, static drowning his calls to the ranger station. That night, a scream tore through the dark. Human, but wrong, cut off abruptly. Dylan gripped his rifle, scanning the blackness, but saw only the pines, their branches swaying without wind. It wasn't natural, he said in a 1995 interview. It was calling me. Days later, driven by unease, Dylan hiked into the valley, his boots sinking into the needle-strewn earth. He found a clearing, its center dominated by an enormous iron trap, teeth stained with fresh blood, too large for any known beast. A trail of blood led to a woman's body, her leg caught in a smaller trap, her face mauled with precise, deliberate cuts. It wasn't an animal, he wrote. It was surgical. The air reeked of iron and decay, the pines too still, their shadows pooling like oil. Deeper in, Dylan found a cabin, hidden, decrepit, its walls hung with rusted hooks and bones, some animal, some not. A man emerged, clad in furs, his face masked with animal skulls, eyes wild with something beyond madness. He lunged, and Dylan fired, grazing his shoulder. The man's scream was more beast than human, and Dylan fled, the forest closing in behind him. He wasn't human, he said, his voice breaking. His eyes saw through me. Rangers found the woman's body, her wounds defying explanation. But the cabin and man were gone, the clearing pristine. The trap, recovered, was too heavy for one person to move, its origin unknown. Dylan quit, haunted by the cabin's stench and the man's gaze, which follows him in every shadow. Joe Martin, a 42-year-old Marine veteran, took a lookout post in a remote Pacific Northwest forest in June 1994. After Vietnam, he sought solitude, finding it in a steel tower overlooking 50 miles of pines. People didn't make sense anymore, he said in a 1996 interview. The forest did. The tower's windows framed endless green, the dirt road below a faint scar, rarely traveled. Its interior was stark, cot, desk, a radio that buzzed with static, the air heavy with the scent of rust and pine. Joe's days were disciplined, scanning for smoke, cleaning his rifle, logging reports with military precision. At night, the forest hummed, its silence a canvas for his thoughts, though memories of combat lingered, sharp as shrapnel. On June 15th, a missing hiker named Charlie was reported, last seen near Joe's sector. He hiked the trails, finding tracks, large, elongated, with claw-like toes, unlike any bear or human. They didn't belong, he wrote, his handwriting tight. In a clearing, Joe found a body, face torn off, hands missing, ribs splayed like broken wings. The air stank of rot, the pines unnaturally still. His radio was dead, and a rustling followed him, too fast, too close, darting between trees. Back in the tower, a shadow appeared inside, tall, formless, moving through walls. Joe fired, bullets passing through it, the air growing thick, his breath labored. "It held me," he said, his voice low. "Minutes, hours, I don't know." He woke drenched in sweat, the shadow gone, the room empty. The next day, the body was missing, the clearing untouched. Soil samples later showed an unknown organic compound, baffling scientists. Joe left, the forest silence a weight he carries, his dreams filled with a shadow that knows his name. Lester Forney was 50 in June 1988, a widower seeking refuge in Montana's Sullivan region, 50 miles from the town of Sullivan. His wife's death had left him a ghost, and the tower, a weathered box above a valley, was his retreat. "The forest was my church," he wrote. "Its silence my prayer." The tower's radio crackled faintly, the wind a constant hymn through the pines, the air thick with the scent of sap and earth. Sullivan buzzed with unease, its 300 residents shaken by disappearances. A boy, a logger, a mechanic, all swallowed by the woods. The forest felt heavy, Lester logged, like it was watching. On June 20th at dusk, he saw a figure among the pines. Motionless, its outline wrong, too pale, too tall. "It wasn't a hunter," he wrote. "It didn't move right." The next day he hiked to the spot, the air damp, the ground soft with needles. A wet, scraping sound led him to a cedar, where the Peterson boy's body hung, limbs twisted, eyes open, placed like a warning. A figure emerged, pale with coal-black eyes, moving with a liquid grace that mocked nature. Lester ran, its steps silent yet close, the forest bending around it. He locked himself in the tower, rifle ready, but the figure never came. Rangers found no body, no tracks, only faint scratches on the cedar, too high for human reach. "They said I was seeing things," Lester said, his voice flat. "But I know." He quit. The forests gaze a shadow in every tree, his nights haunted by the boy's lifeless stare. Cal's chain drifter, Evan's yellow-eyed stalker, Dylan's masked hunter, Joe's formless shadow, Lester's pale watcher. Each lookout faced a terror that defies logic, their stories woven by a shared dread. The silence that hunts, the tracks that vanish, the whispers that claim their names. The forests of Montana, Idaho, and the Pacific Northwest are not mere landscapes but entities, their roots deep with secrets. These men, scarred by solitude and fear, carry their truths, their towers abandoned yet alive. What is the whisper that binds them? A single predator, stalking the wilds, or a chorus of ancient hungers, stirred by human presence? The forest knows, and its silence is a vow.